Chapter 7. We have talked about all the major releases of Windows that are used, pretty much, with the exception of some things that are outdated that are still used. But this chapter, we're going to focus on troubleshooting and supporting Windows. I've actually spent time doing this real world, so I will try to inject helpful things in there, what I've used functions for in the past, just so maybe it will help you remember. So we're going to talk about the registry, user options, device options, and then just some common Windows troubleshooting things that you're going to come across. Now, some of you may think I'm in network administration. Why would I need to know how to troubleshoot the individual computer? Well, in the real world, you have to know everything. And you know that, right? When you tell somebody you're in school for IT, they immediately ask you about their PlayStation. It's like, why? I don't know anything about that. Well, people associate that you'll just know everything. So from now on, you have to know everything. No pressure. So we're going to talk about some of those common things. But first, we're going to talk about the registry. So I've got a video to describe the registry to you from fast as possible. But the registry is essentially a big database, and it has all the settings for the computer inside of it. So the drivers, the services, applications, components to the operating system, and preferences that the user has set are all contained in that database, and that database is created whenever Windows is installed.
Cryptic error messages are something that pretty much everyone has had to deal with at some point, from the console gamer suffering the Xbox 360's red ring of death to Michael Bolton from Office Space wondering what in the world PC low letter actually means. But if you're a Windows user, you've probably encountered messages telling you that there's a problem with the registry, as well as those shady banner ads and TV commercials telling you to buy a registry cleaning utility of some sort. So what exactly is this mysterious registry? Why can issues with it cause problems for your PC? And does it really need to be cleaned periodically, like some kind of digital kitty litter box? Okay. Well, unlike your cat's toilet, the registry isn't really a dumping ground. It's actually a database on your hard drive that stores important settings for both Windows and other programs you have installed. You see, back in the early days of Windows, both the OS itself and other programs relied on small text files called INIs to store settings. But Microsoft developed the registry as a more robust solution that can store many more settings than an individual INI, help different pieces of software communicate with each other more easily, keep track of settings for multiple users on the same machine, and use a hierarchical structure to keep things organized. That structure is actually easy to view for yourself, just by typing regedit into the Run window, which launches a program called Registry Editor. From there, you'll see a massive array of folder-like structures called registry keys, which contain a myriad of settings. And despite the warnings from Microsoft that editing the registry can cause serious damage to your computer, it can actually be a very powerful way to customize Windows, so long as you don't go around messing with things that you are unsure of. A quick web search will yield all sorts of registry tweaks for both Windows and other programs that you might find useful. Things like customizing the taskbar or right-click context menu, changing the font in the command prompt window, changing the delay when you mouse over something between when the information pops up, stopping Windows Update from constantly interrupting what you're doing, and even adding your own logo to the system window and control panel. These are just a few ways that you can make Windows behave the way you want with registry hacks. Simple registry adjustments are also often good ways to fix common PC problems. In fact, many hot fixes from Microsoft come in the form of registry entries that you can merge into your own registry with a simple double click. But although the registry lets you tweak plenty of things that you just can't do from a settings menu, it does make moving a program from one PC to another a total pain due to just how many settings it stores and how scattered they can get throughout the registry, and it can indeed cause issues with Windows if it gets corrupted. However, with that said, while certain errors in the registry can cause problems, not even with Windows, but even with specific programs, you should be wary of some of those registry cleaning programs that try to convince you your registry needs to be regularly cleaned and that doing so will give you faster performance. Because the truth of the matter is that oftentimes the errors that these sorts of programs fix are just entries from uninstalled programs that kind of sit in the registry and don't really do much of anything. So the chances that any individual registry error is actually slowing down your computer are pretty darn low. However, if you're actually getting registry-related error messages or have a piece of malware on your computer that may have put things into the registry to make it harder to remove, running a reputable cleaner program may not be a bad idea. Just make sure it's a trustworthy, popular utility and not some random thing that you downloaded after clicking a tacky, in-your-face advertisement.
Okay, so there's a little bit about the system registry. Okay, so the registry holds these changes. A lot of these changes happen automatically, or they can happen when you trigger an action. So when Windows starts, shuts down, during setup, if you make a change in control panel, if you change the background of your computer, it changes a registry file. If you install a new device, if you install a new app, if you make some sort of change within an app, then that app has stuff in the registry, and then that changes things in the registry. Well, the point is to try to keep track of all of your settings. And registry files come in different, they're actually binary files. They're 1s and 0 files. Each one of those is represented in what's called a hive. So these are some of the files that you might see inside the registry. Each one of these types of files has its own little location that it stays in. So if you were looking for ntuser.dat, which is the current logged on user, it would be in the hive that's called current user or users. The SAM is where you keep things like account information and passwords. So the SAM is located in the SAM registry location. A lot of these are named the same thing, so it's kind of intuitive. But for example, the security, that's where you would set password complexity. How many characters does a password need to be? And the system could be maybe the load order of different drivers. But each thing has its place. Most of the registry files are in the config folder, so you would be in Windows System 32 and config, and all those things are in there. But the registry kind of makes them in this way that makes a little more sense than just kind of trying to find files somewhere in a folder. Who knows when you're going to find them. The default user profile defines what this screen looks like, so you could change the screen. You can change what image loads up in the background, the way the icons look. The temporary portion of the registry is under the hardware hive. If hardware is detected, information is loaded there. So let's say you plug in something through USB, you use it, then you unplug it. The driver only needs to load to make that thing work while it's plugged in. When it's not plugged in, it doesn't need it. So that's where that would be located. You can use regedit to view the registry. It looks like you're in the Windows File Explorer or Windows Explorer. So it has keys within it. There's different data types available. I'll caution you that if you mess something up in the registry, you can mess things up. So really be sure that you know what you're doing, or you have good instructions from a trusted source when you play with the registry editor. The first time it only shows root keys, and then later on you'll be able to drill into these as you make system changes. It's going to put it here, and you'll see the different components of the registry kind of come to life. The different root keys are listed here. You need to sort of have an idea of what things are in these root keys. I don't know that we're going to get really, really specific on where things are located and stuff, but that's a little outside the scope of the course. When you're playing in the registry, you'll see different kinds of data types. Raw binary data, a string of text, multiple strings of text, or a sequence of characters that are readable to human beings, not computers. If you want to back up the registry because you like your settings a certain way, you want to make sure that they stay, you can create a restore point that will back up the whole registry, or you can also import and export in and out of the registry if you want to do that. If you want to back out, this is what you can do. Right-click on the main folder or folders within it, and just go to export, and then you can keep a copy of that if you wanted to. So the power user options, in Windows 7, both of those were on the shutdown menu because you can switch back and forth. On Windows 8, they separated those into two separate menus. Here was the Windows 7 shutdown menu, and you can see here it says switch user and log off. But then when they moved to Windows 8.1, you could just click on the user tile to see the user menu, and then the power button was something different. So that's an important thing to note. Power options, you've got sleep, shutdown, and restart. All of those are the ones that we see all the time. You might be able to use hibernate. You need to know the difference between sleep and hibernate. With sleep, the computer stays in a low power mode. All the settings and the states are set in RAM. When you resume from sleep, everything looks the same way it was. All the apps have the same things in it. It's faster to do than hibernating. And whenever you remove power, well then sleep mode goes off. So if the power goes out, your computer would power down and you would possibly lose some settings. With hibernate, it's going to save an image in the RAM, and it uses this file called hybrfile.sys. It's going to send a power down signal to the computer. Hibernate does not require any power, but because it shuts the system totally down, it takes a longer time to bring it back up. So to the user, they don't really know the difference, but if you had to pick apart a difference, sleep requires power, but it wakes up more quickly, whereas hibernation doesn't require power, and it takes a longer time to wake up. Like, you know, in nature, right? It takes longer to get out of hibernation than sleep, right? When you shut down with Windows 7, lots of things actually have to happen for that process to occur. Sends a message to all the applications to save everything. Sometimes if you have something still up, it will say, you know, Microsoft Word is still running. Do you want to save this before you shut down? And then you can make some changes there. It's going to shut down all the services to the devices, close the operating system. Anything that's pending writing, it's going to write to the hard drive. And then it's going to send the signal to power down the computer. So all those things have to work to be able to shut down. In Windows 8 and 10, they made it a little bit easier. They're going to send the message to the apps to save data and settings, close the settings for each user that's logged into the computer, hibernate the Windows session, save it, and then power down the computer. So that's the hybrid shutdown maneuver in Windows. So restarting is actually the fix for most common user problems, and it sounds silly. If you're a fan of the IT Crowd, which is on Netflix, you understand this. This is the character. This is what they say constantly. This is it's like a sitcom, a British comedy about a team of IT people. And one of their things is, hello IT, have you tried turning it off and back on again? And pretty much every time they go, oh, that worked, and they hang up the phone. Because that's true. That is actually either a full shutdown, a full startup. No matter which way you're restarting, just a general refreshing of settings will often solve quite a bit of user issues. When you're starting up with Windows 7, first there's a post test, which is a power on self-test. So that is a series of tests on system hardware to determine that it has enough memory present, that all the devices required to have an operating system, like a hard drive, are there and waiting to be used. You'll go through initial startup, the bootloader. It'll detect hardware, configure it, load the kernel, and then log on. So again, all those things are happening in some cases 8 to 10 seconds to get us started using the operating system. This is the logon screen. This is the logon phase, what that would look like. With Windows 8, 8.1, and 10, computers boot up a lot faster in general. There's some reasons for that. It's not just because hardware seems to be faster. They've actually been written to do that with secure boot and fast boot. So UEFI is the new BIOS. So the BIOS is the firmware that the motherboard needs to be able to talk to everything that's connected to the computer. We needed that because the previous version of BIOS didn't work for hard drives that are over 2 terabytes. Used to 500 gigs was a huge hard drive. Now 2 and 4 gigs is a huge hard drive. So that change had to be made. Trusted boot is going to check every system file on the operating system before it loads up to make sure that it hasn't been tampered with in any way. There's also fast boot. That will bring the system out of hibernation. It's a little faster than a traditional startup would be. So when you have multiple cores in your computer, as generally we do now, we have 4, 6, 8 cores, they all work together when processing that hibernation file, that hiberfile.sys, and it makes it happen a whole lot faster. You can modify the system startup with BCD edit. If you go into command prompt and type that, you'll see all the different settings for, and here's a screenshot of what that looks like, the different settings associated with the boot manager and the bootloader if you wanted to change those. But again, be sure you know what you're doing there. So device drivers is another really common area where people have trouble. All devices need a driver to operate. The system just doesn't know what to do with something. You have to tell it how it interacts with that piece of equipment. So one of the things that we run into is permissions. You have to have administrative permissions to install anything, even a device driver, on a machine. Assigned device driver means that Microsoft has given it a seal of approval that all of its code is good. It hasn't been altered in any way to be malicious. If you come across something that is unsigned, it will not install anymore. You will have to go find a signed version of the driver. That's really not that much of a problem unless you're trying to use some sort of device that's a little bit older, and maybe it has trouble finding a signed device driver for a newer version of Windows. You manage installed devices using the devices and printers and control panel. That's where you can set a default printer. That's another common thing that needs to be done. In Windows 8 and 8.1, that's PC settings. In Windows 10, it's just settings. But here's what that looks like. Here's the control panel, devices and printers. So you can add devices here. You can scan to see if new things have been added. You can see a list of all the printers and faxes and all the devices connected. If you wanted to change your default printer, all you have to do is right-click on it and say set as default printer. The device stage is something in devices and printers that lets you look at all the configurations of the devices and make changes there if you need to. Here in Windows 8, it was PC settings. You can see it looks quite a bit different now, but you can do all the same things in that same area. Windows 10, it was just called settings. You tell it what kind of device you want to add or remove, and it gives you links to the other two places. So it's not quite all in one place as it was before. You can view and change device properties, update drivers, configure settings, uninstall them, or roll back. So as far as common driver problems, either you don't have a new NF1 and you need to install a new one. You installed a new one that's maybe not quite compatible and you have to roll it back, or you don't have one at all. That's just about all that can be wrong with drivers. Okay, so Windows within it has its own troubleshooting and recovery tools. We're going to talk about which ones are total crap and which ones actually work. So when you have a startup failure, so a startup failure means that you didn't boot into Windows. You might use the Windows recovery environment. So the computer is going to fail at startup. It's going to do one of two things: launch a startup and repair screen, or it's just going to start Windows normally. Well, if you're having a startup failure, you're not really going to be able to start Windows normally, so then you have something else to deal with. It's called different things depending on the version of Windows: advanced boot options, advanced startup options, but essentially you're getting this screen. So this screen is actually a really effective troubleshooting tool. You've got repair your computer. Repair your computer is the startup and repair screen. That doesn't do anything. It does nothing. And it will sit and run and run and run for hours if you let it, but it doesn't actually work. So we've got safe mode with networking, or safe mode with command prompt. Those are especially helpful if you've got viruses. So if you've got viruses, you're going to have to launch into a safe Windows mode where not everything is initiated, and then do your virus removal through that. You can enable boot logging, enable low resolution video. So if you have a problem with your graphics card, you want to set Windows to the lowest possible video settings, then that would be the way that you were able to get into Windows so that you can fix that. Last known good configuration says my stuff is broke, so take me back to the time where it wasn't, and that may work as well. Another thing, disable auto restart. Has anybody ever got a blue screen of death?
So far, no.
So far, oh man, you're a lucky one. I've seen many. So the blue screen comes up and it gives you some completely nonsensical string of text. Page found in a non-page error. Page error found in a non-page, I don't know. Something ridiculous, right? And then what does the computer do? It does one of two things. It sits there and nothing happens, or it restarts. And a lot of times when it fails, you'll see the blue screen pop up and it'll immediately restart within a second. So if you do this disable automatic restart on system failure, it will sit on that blue screen. That blue screen is actually something that's given to us by Microsoft to try to figure out what's wrong with it. You can be able to Google that error and try to figure things like that out. Page fault in a non-page area, I think, is a RAM error, and I only know that because I've done it before. But this menu actually gets you through quite a bit of advanced boot options. In a lot of cases, you can tap F8 while the computer's starting up, and it will give you that menu. In Windows 8 or newer, they have something called the refresh. So this isn't like reformatting your computer. It's just restoring, kind of. It's keeping all of your apps, keeping all of your settings, all of your documents, but it is reinstalling the core Windows files that you need to actually be able to use Windows. So this actually works, and it works pretty well, and it doesn't mess up your data, which is very nice. Here's what the refresh looks like, and it will come up and tell you these are all the things we're going to change. This is all that we're not going to change. Now, does that mean you need to back up your data first? Yeah, probably, because you just don't know what's going to happen. But you should be backing up your data anyway. But refreshing your PC in Windows 10 very much works. You can also reset your PC. So that is like a formatting and a starting all over. It removes everything. All your programs are gone. You're probably going to have software and licenses for things that were already installed on your computer so that you can fix it. The restore may work better. It kind of depends on your problem. For example, if you have a bad hard drive. Hard drives go bad all the time. I've killed so many hard drives, I can't even tell you. And when you have to install a new hard drive in a computer, the hard drive has nothing on it. So you have to have Windows keys, you have to have your Microsoft Office keys, anything else that was installed, you have to know where the data was. Heaven forbid you have Microsoft Outlook and you've got some PST file buried 15 folders down you got to go find. If you can even access the hard drive, because the hard drive's bad. So restore, you're taking it back to out-of-the-box settings. What was it like when I took it out of the box from Best Buy or New It? Reset is just a complete deletion and starting all the way over with nothing. And I know in the past it has been very difficult to explain that to the end user, because they think that the computer should just look like the way they got it out of the box. But the hard drive that stored everything on it is bad, so you have to start all over. Sometimes that can cause some frustration, and you've got to work through that. MSconfig is one of the most handy things in Windows for me. This is a list of all the programs that start up when Windows start up. And you can disable them for troubleshooting purposes, or what I like to do is I like to go through and say, what of these things do I actually need to work? I need sound, I need Windows, I probably don't need, I need some sort of antivirus to come up, but I probably don't need Adobe Acrobat to come up in the tray, because when I want to read a PDF, I'll just open the PDF and it will come up then. So a lot of times disabling things like that, as long as you know what you're disabling, will actually improve the load time for Windows quite a bit. So when you want to know why is my computer so slow when it's booting to Windows, almost every time you install something, it wants to be in this list. It wants to start up when Windows starts up. So if you can stop that from happening, it will make the performance much, much faster. They put this in Task Manager in Windows 8 and 10, and I still forget about it constantly. But you can just right-click on the Task Manager, or on the toolbar, and say Task Manager to take you to this window. And it does tell you whether it's enabled or disabled. And it also tells you what kind of impact it has on the startup of Windows, which is really helpful. So send to OneNote. If you're not a person that uses OneNote, there's no reason for you to have that service enabled, right? When you want to look at all the devices on your computer, you use Device Manager. That's going to tell you if you have a problem with something that's installed. So if you see an exclamation mark and a yellow triangle, that means there's a problem with that device. If there's something without a driver, it's going to show up in the Other Devices category, and it'll look like this. So in the beginning, we have a device with no driver. It shows up in Other Devices, and it calls it Internet Access Server. So it has a generic name that's essentially saying, I don't know what this is, but if you give me a driver, I'll see what I can do with it. So if you were to click on that and get more information, you could update the driver. So let's assume that it's something that you installed on purpose, and you know what it is, and it has to do with routing. So you would install the driver, and then it appears under the correct category. So now it understands what it is and what it can do with it. But the OS can't properly identify it, much less use it, without having some driver that will tell it what it's supposed to do. If you install a driver and for some reason it doesn't work, maybe it's not compatible with that version of Windows, you can always click Rollback Driver and take it back to the last one that was installed.